Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we share stories of healing and hope so that you remember you are strong enough. I'm your host, Claudia. Today, I have an amazing treat for you guys, and I am so excited. We're bringing in the hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast, and they're going to talk about how they work to avoid vicarious trauma. They're also going to talk about their new book, Shadow of the Bridge, about the case in Delphi, Indiana. Please help me welcome Áine, Cain and Kevin Greenlee. Áine and Kevin, I am so excited to welcome you to Strong Enough today. How are you two doing?
We are so excited to be talking to you, Claudia. So, we're thrilled and doing really good. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I have been following you guys for a long time because I am a true crime, I'd like to say aficionado versus buff. I'm a former law enforcement officer. I'm a domestic violence expert. I do hits on court TV just like you guys do. So I'm super familiar with your work. And I know very recently that you were able to be a witness to a case that not many people were able to be a witness to, first off. So will you share first a little bit about what got you guys into the Murder Sheet? And then we're going to talk about that specific case.
Absolutely. And so I think in terms of how the Murder Sheet was born, Kevin and I are both strange and morbid people who
love it.
I guess we're into true crime, so I guess we all kind of get that. But we connected over an unsolved homicide in Indiana that we were both researching at the same time. Kevin kind of stalked me on the internet. It all sounded very creepy from the outside, but I was impressed with his research skills. I was like, that's a man who knows what he's doing. So we got married at some point later. And just kind of, I think you wanted to do the podcast and I did not.
Yes.
I thought, oh gosh, a podcast, what's going to happen with that? That just sounds like a mess. And he was like, no, let's do it. So I said, fine, but we're going to have to do journalistic sort of, legal analysis. We're not going to be personality centric. And so that's how the Murder Sheet came to be. And we initially started covering restaurant homicides because that was our initial focus. And we sort of expanded into just kind of basically doing whatever. I feel like the show is just all over the place. We're doing a historical crime one week, talking to an author the next week, interviewing a prosecutor. It is what it is, but hopefully people find it somewhat interesting and helpful.
Well, that's what makes it cool to me is that it isn't cookie cutter, because there are podcasts out there that are like that. It's like, here's this crime, here's what happened, here's our thoughts, on to the next. And it's just rinse and repeat. So I appreciate that you guys don't rinse and repeat. You invent and reinvent. I got to know, what was the thought behind restaurant crimes?
So the case that we connected over were the Burger Chef murders. And that was a infamous restaurant case. And here's the thing. It doesn't make any sense because most restaurant homicides are a situation where everyone is gathered in the office or the freezer and killed in the restaurant. Burger Chef, they're abducted, driven across county lines, and murdered a good distance away. So we've always been trying to figure that out. Why were they?
So our first response to that was, this seems like it's very unusual. This seems like something that wouldn't happen in other restaurant homicides. But then we realized, is that really true? Is that just an impression we have? And so we started creating a spreadsheet in which we started looking for restaurant homicides and listing features and information about them. And that's why it's called the Murder Sheet, because originally all of our cases came from that spreadsheet.
And that's one of my pet peeves in crime, where people say stuff like, how could a 15-year-old kill anybody? And you're like, look at history, look at all the crimes. It's like, this happens all the time. So Murder Sheet kind of came out of response to some of that, of trying to say, okay, is something truly unusual and unique, or is it not? And we found it is quite unique. It's not the only case, but it's quite unique.
I love the nerdiness of the spreadsheet. You said spreadsheet, and I'm just like, whoa, that is fantastic. So you're a stalker, researcher,
yes,
and a big nerd. I love it. This is
Yes.
fantastic.
She's a lucky woman.
I'm going to say I will say, I'll take credit for the spreadsheet. I remember I don't know, I was like feeling anxious or like kind of depressed. And I was like, I'm going to do some true crime research, because that'll put me in a good mood for some reason. And I remember just like going and starting knocking. And I called Kevin. I'm like, yeah, I'm starting to make like a spreadsheet about this. And he was like, nice. And then we're like both adding to it. It was great.
That's when you knew you had a winner, right, Kevin?
Yeah, it's a color-coded mess now. I think it's about 800 cases, but it's there's different trends we were able to pick out, and it's interesting. It's not mathematically sound. History major, English major,
Uh,
but no.
But hey, so it's grammatically correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
allegedly.
So, so let's talk about Abby and Libby, the case that really brought us here today, and a case that you guys have been, and I'm going to say a part of, because you guys have been a part of it in some kind of weird ways with emails being received and things like that. What got you guys interested in that case?
So we were living together in Brooklyn, New York, and ultimately moved to Indiana, where Kevin is from. I love Brooklyn, New York, also love Indiana. And it was just a good move for us at that point, getting married and trying to get a house and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And so we come back here, and it was a case that was really super sensitive and super top of mind for a lot of Hoosiers. As you can imagine, everyone sees themselves, they see their kids in Abby and Libby. And so, even as far away as like in the southern part of the state, people would say, "Oh, you have a true crime podcast? Have you looked into Abby and Libby yet?" And it was something that we just kind of felt like, okay, maybe we could add something here and we should sort of see if we can, and by taking a journalistic approach. So that was sort of where that came from.
Yeah.
I feel like your journalistic approach is super unique because we do see some personalities out there that clearly don't really care about the truth. It's very evident in their reporting. For those just listening, I'm doing air quotes right now, that truth isn't really paramount. Why is it so important to you guys?
Oh gosh. I mean, the truth to me is everything. And it's that's what we all want. And I think everyone wants that on some level. I think some people do not have the tools or the mindset or the emotional capacity to truly seek that out in a way that makes sense. I mean, with journalism is a practice that's not perfect, and the media gets a lot wrong and does a lot wrong. So I'm not saying that it's just, oh, everything's all good. And journalists are always, right. Although I do say that a lot in arguments with Kevin.
Yeah.
But
as you should.
Yeah, I'm going to drop that, my press card. But, it's a situation where, journalistic fundamentals have been shown to try to get closer to the truth in a responsible way. And I think there's a big difference. And I think, this is kind of where, everyone thought, okay, the internet's going to be civilian journalism and everyone's going to do it. And then I think I saw a tweet a while ago and I was like, this sums it up very well. And it was something to the effect of like, it's much easier to just get on a camera and scream about stuff that you don't understand, so you think it's a conspiracy theory, than it is to actually go and talk to people and gather documents. It's hard. Journalism is time consuming, and oftentimes you're not going to land on a sexy answer. So you might say, okay, this looks corrupt. What's happening? And then you dig into it and you're like, oh, this is what's really happening. And this is why it's happening. And people are like, actually, I think I prefer the conspiracy.
It's more exciting.
Yeah, it's way more exciting. So people get caught up in the excitement versus the truth. And I think they say, well, in my gut, I feel like it's the more exciting thing. And it's like I think a lot of those people are analyzing things emotionally.
I just remember sitting, it was a very small courtroom. And I remember sitting in this courtroom for one of the pretrial hearings, and we're just feet away from the victims' families. And the witness who is testifying is a CSI, Pat Cicero. And he begins describing in some detail, and in some frankly upsetting detail, exactly how these two girls died. And as he's talking, you become aware there's a sound, and you look over, and it's the sound of the family members crying as they hear these terrible details about the last moments of these girls they love so much. And that's always in the forefront of my mind. We owe the victims' families the truth. We owe the victims the truth. Otherwise, why are we doing this?
And we owe our audience the truth too, because listen, I've been a true crime consumer and I've gotten
Mhm.
swept up in stuff, and then I've had the frustration of looking into it more and being
Mhm.
like, wait, why didn't they include this information or they didn't explain this? So we never want to waste anybody's time or further re-traumatize people when we can avoid it. That's been a big thing for us in terms of dealing with victims' families.
And I noticed that because the victims and their families, especially, often get lost in the shuffle. And when you think about a lot of recent cases, particularly, we know the suspect's name and we know the victims' names, but the suspect's name is what we see time and time again. Abby and Libby and Delphi have been a little different. Do you think that's because we didn't have the suspect for so long that we had to, thank goodness, focus on the victims? Or is there a different vibe there that people were able to push their names out there and make those known?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I do think the lack of a solve for a number of years, people were familiar with Abby and Libby, and we didn't know who killed them. So
Mhm.
everyone's just sort of focusing on them. And I think their families in particular did a really heroic job of getting out there, telling their story. Here's who we lost. These girls were incredibly important, and just doing that advocacy. So I think there was an intentionality behind that for those families because they were really able to raise people's awareness and keep it in the public spotlight, which
Mhm.
was, something that victims' families can do, keep the pressure on law enforcement. And listen, this is a case where I think the law enforcement officers were at that point just as invested and certainly just like trying to get that answer for them. But at the same time, it can't hurt to just say, let's keep putting this at the
Mhm.
forefront.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing for sure because that's where the focus should be. So when you start looking at Delphi and you kind of start digging into this case, what made it different for you guys? What made it that case that you couldn't let go of to the point where you've now written a book about it?
It hooks you. You kind of, I mean, like one of the reasons I picked the title is I feel like everyone kind of falls under the shadow of the bridge at some point. Like you kind of just get
Mhm.
stuck there. I think a lot of people got stuck there and they kind of lost their minds and sort of became full-fledged conspiracy theorists. Other people get stuck there because it's just heartbreaking and you want to know what happened here
Mhm.
and find answers even though there's such darkness. And I think that was kind of where we were coming from. And there just started to be so many developments, and we were in a mode of like, okay, if we can shine a light and try to explain this to people in a way that's understandable and makes them feel empowered, and they can come to different conclusions or have different opinions, but they can at least be empowered with the tools to analyze and think about this in a way that makes sense. Because you know I'll say this, like, having Kevin has been, just so wonderful with his legal analysis, because that's not something like how I think, in terms of
Mhm.
like, how do you read a legal document or how do we think about this principle in terms of evidence that's allowed in court? It's complicated. And so we wanted to be people who could be a resource for others interested in the case.
And you took that to such a place during the trial that you guys were on 5 seconds of sleep, 5 calories of food, one bathroom break per day. How did it affect you guys as individuals and as a couple during that whole time?
A good question. That's a really good question. It was rough. I mean, it was I ended up having to go to physical therapy afterwards because I was so like,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, like it was. And I don't want to sound like we're complaining because we did it to ourselves, I mean, we were choosing to be there. And that was one of the things that kept us coming back because we kept on being like, let's just leave. And then we'd be like, we can't leave. The families can't. Like, but like we like
Right.
we will be leaving these families here. We
Hmm.
will be leaving anyone who is trying to get to the truth. We'll be
Hmm.
abandoning them. So we can't do that.
And a lot of people, before they go through a hard event or a difficult time, you don't have advance warning. You don't get like a letter or something saying your loved one is going to be killed or you're in a traffic accident.
Mm-hmm.
We had advance warning of this, and we knew that the access issues would be difficult and it
Mm-hmm.
would require us to give up a lot of sleep. And that basically all we would be doing would be standing in line, going to court, recording, quickly eating something, and then going to bed. And so we talked about it a lot. And we talked about how we could support each other and how we would be patient with each other and understand there'd be times when one of us or both of us are tired and maybe not in the best of moods, and that we would let things go maybe a little bit more than we would ordinarily.
Yeah, we were big on the letting things go front, and I think that helped our marriage. We when we got together, we were living in a 350 square foot studio apartment in Brooklyn. So early on, like we've always had different trials where it's like, wow, we are really compatible because we're not going to kill each other, even though it's this kind of cramped setting. I think this was another test for us, but it was one we were definitely expecting. So we communicated. I think we got into a fight once, and I think that's a testament
Yes.
to, I
That's
was like,
solid.
look, we're fighting less now than we would have been.
Maybe we should go back to living that lifestyle and we'll fight even less.
We'll go camping for an extended time. And it was also just like there were so many perceived threats, as you mentioned, the food, the discomfort, all that.
Mhm.
But also just, like there was always a possibility that, one of the people who are kind of like nutty in the case is going to show up and try to fight us or something. So like there's, you're kind of scanning for threats a lot. And
Right.
I think we probably should have divided and conquered more, but we found each other like a source of comfort. So we kind of just stuck together more than we probably should have strategically.
Yeah, it made a lot more sense for maybe Anya go to the morning ones, I go to the afternoons.
Or like,
But
yeah, Kevin takes one day, I take the
Right.
next. We're just like, we don't want to leave each other. It was rough.
Let's talk about those nutcases for a little bit, because that's something, generally speaking, as a podcast host, you don't really have to worry about because you're in your studio, you're behind your walls of your house and it's just your voice or, sometimes your video and voice, but you're secluded from those nutcases. And now you're in a position in being there for the trial that you're right there alongside them. And your show is very popular. People know who you guys are. How nervous did that make you putting yourselves in that position? Or did you even think about it?
We were pretty nervous.
yeah.
Now, on the other hand, we knew, law enforcement is going to be all around. So it would, we didn't necessarily think anything would happen, but we've gotten threats before. We've gotten, pretty overt threats. We've gotten veiled threats. We've gotten doxxed. We've got, different stuff has happened that made us think, okay, some of these people are like truly, unstable or, possibly going to do something, or they're going to, if they aren't unstable, they're going to try to egg someone unstable on to do something.
Right.
So it's like, you got to have that in the back of your mind. But there was mostly, for the most part, a good community around the line and around attending court, and so you could kind of rely on other people a bit to kind of be like, okay, we're in this together, and if someone starts acting up, we're going to be able to deal with it together. So I think that ultimately was gratifying, even though it's like, yeah,
But yeah, it was definitely stressful.
at one point I was like sitting next to a guy who like I know is threatened to like punch me in the face. Like, and it's just like, it's like, wow, you're a pathetic little man, aren't you? Like you're just gonna sit there and smile and be like like as if I don't know who you are. It just, so there's people that you're just like, wow, you're just a loser. And most of these people are just internet people who feel really big when they're typing something up. And if you ever saw them in public, they'd like look alarmed and cross the street. I mean, that's who they are. So most of the time it's just like, whatever.
Yeah, there's something sad about it because a lot
Yes.
of these people who do this sort of behavior, if you look at them and their lives, you see a lot of lost jobs, a lot of economic issues, lost relationships, lost homes, and it's just something sad about it because frankly, there's even people who've been awful to me said terrible
Mhm.
things about me, but I recognize there's some humanity in them, and that if they channel that somewhere else, the good in them could come out, and I think they would have a more successful life.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of anger. And it's
Mhm.
people say, oh, these people are all dealing with mental illness. No, they're not. I mean, they're not. But they are dealing with a lot of anger. That's the one universal thing. And it's like I do wish some of them healing because it's like, that's a bad way to go through life.
It's got to be a miserable way to live, quite frankly.
Yes.
You guys found a lot of people supporting you, getting in line for you late at night so you could get an extra 5 seconds of sleep. People that you didn't even know were willing to put themselves in crappy positions to help you guys out. How cool was that to see community supporting you in such a way when nobody owed you anything?
Absolutely amazing. I had no idea because we sit here in our room here in our house and we just talk to each other, and sometimes it's hard to believe anybody's even listening. But the people are listening and they're willing to do things for us. I can't tell you how much that meant and how gratifying that was.
It was immensely gratifying. It makes me almost emotional thinking about it. These people are so kind and so helpful. And I mean, I'm super adverse to asking for help for anything, so it was
Mhm.
difficult for me to like be like, I don't want to like put you out or like let me give you something back. Like but they were, I mean, they were just amazing. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And so we ended up thanking a lot of them in the book just to say like, hey, like we truly would not have been able to do this without them. And I still don't know why they did it. I'm like, that's just so nice. It was really cold out.
It seemed also like access got even more difficult kind of along the way because you guys talked about, well, why aren't they doing it this way? And they could do this instead of that. Was that a struggle to deal with when it almost felt like the rules changed along the way to make things more difficult? And did you feel like you guys were a part of that? And what I mean is that you didn't get press passes, though you should have, and people knew who you were involved with the case. So did you ever think, well, this is clearly they're trying to keep us out, and by gosh, because of that, we're getting in every single second of this trial?
So I think the initial us not getting press passes was definitely about us. My guess is just having a sense of Judge Gull's personality is that she saw us as these upstart podcasters who were trying to subvert her rules by trying to work with a newspaper to get press passes. And like I mean we were. I mean like let's be honest, like we were yes, she was correct. I think it was ridiculous how heavy-handed she was about the whole thing. And I think it's like if a newspaper is willing to say, yeah, we'll work with them, I mean, we have some credibility there. But, I mean, that was what it was. It was the most aggravating thing. I remember one time we got like another letter, email rejecting us. And I just started laughing maniacally. It was like I'm turning into the Joker, over this situation. But, it was a situation where I think that was targeted at us, which was annoying, but it is what it is. Then during trial, I don't think that was so much directed at us as more of a facet of Judge Gull, not giving a hoot and
Mhm.
sort of being like, yeah, I don't really care if this makes it hard for everyone else. I think yeah.
There was something that was targeted towards people who were perceived as thinking Richard Allen was guilty, because there were a group of pro Richard Allen supporters who would make a point of getting in line, getting as many seats as possible, and then immediately leaving. And they were doing that specifically to exclude people who they thought had the other point of view. And they started doing that late in the trial. So we had to come up with ways to deal with that. But one thing that I found utterly bizarre about that is these people started doing this when Richard Allen's defense team started presenting the case for Richard Allen. And so by doing that, they made it more difficult for people to understand and hear what the defense had to say. So it
Mhm.
seemed like they were shooting themselves in the foot.
These are not very bright guys and things got out of hand. I mean, the classic all the president's men line. I'll say this. the whole thing sometimes felt like a much darker version of like if you've ever been like at a family party where there's a DJ and they do musical chairs, but the rules keep changing every 2 seconds, and it's like
Right.
go the other way. We're gonna change the song now. Now you have to stand on your head on the chair, and there was you can never relax because normally I'm like, okay, this is difficult, but I'm used to it now, and we're just gonna keep doing it like this, and you never could do that during because there was always going to be something like, actually, you're supposed to go out the back door. Actually, you got to go down these stairs. You got to line up in the lobby. You got to do this or that or this. And it wasn't any of the fault of the deputies or the people doing this. They were just
Deputies were great.
They were amazing. They were dealing with what they were given. They weren't being arbitrary. I think the judge was to a certain extent.
We have seen some other crazy supporters recently with Karen Reed.
Oh my God.
To another level of ridiculousness. How do you think these Richard Allen, I'm just going to call them fans. I mean, I'm just going to say what it is. How do you think these fans compared? And again, because we couldn't really see them, we didn't get that view of them, all in their pink t-shirts and holding their signs like we did with Reed. So how do you think they compared on the nutty fan scale?
I think they're cousins. These groups probably actually have some of the same people in them to a certain extent. And I think the Karen Reed, Free Karen Reed movement certainly got more mainstream acceptance. I think there might be a number of reasons for that, and certainly she was acquitted. So, I mean, my view is that the defense sort of ended up successfully tainting the jury pool to a certain level. And I think with Richard Allen, that didn't happen as much. And I will say this, as much as I didn't like no cameras in courtrooms, I think that did tamp down on some level. I think some of these people want to be on TV or they want to have that attention. And, maybe there would have been more fanfare around some of this or, would have caught on more had it been televised. So I think, but I think they're the same type of people, at least hardcore fans, because I mean, maybe people who are like, I'm not quite convinced he's guilty, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. Like that's not the same thing as being a fan. It's just more having a different opinion. But the people who are like, no, he's amazing, and I love him, and I'm like a fan, and like, oh, all of law enforcement's evil, and they didn't. I don't know. You just very conspiratorially minded, not really like basing anything off of any evidence. And just, once they lock in on that position, nothing could convince them otherwise. And that's a bad place to be because it's like, okay, but if you're not willing to be swayed by any facts or at least understand where the jury's coming from, that seems like a problem. And like, why are you here? I think there's an element of society that like would love to see people get away with crimes, like that, like it kind of excites them. In some instances, like with Richard Allen, women being like, oh my God, like I think, maybe I can be the next Mrs. Allen or something if things don't work out with that couple. I think there's like an attraction to violent men. I think there's an attraction to people getting away with things and thumbing their nose at the system. And one thing that's interesting for me is often with the Richard Allen people, you'll find out that either they've had some extensive legal trouble or they are related to someone who has. And so I think they kind of end up empathizing with that. Overly emphasizing with that, even in a case where it's like he murdered 2 kids.
Right. I can see people supporting, and I don't want to say I support this supporting, but like Luigi Mangione. Like, I don't agree with it, but I get it. People are nuts. They support him. But like you said, this is a dude who slaughtered 2 beautiful, innocent, lovely girls. How does that make sense that people can support that? Like, I don't get it.
Bizarre. And also, if you're in the room with him and you look at this man, he's not an attractive man. I don't mean to be cruel.
But he's not.
He doesn't have charisma. He doesn't have any magnetism. You hear from people who worked with him or doctors who treated him. He was very mixed up. He was a very weak person. I don't understand what people see in him that they want to elevate like this.
Well, here's the thing. He's prefabricated, right? Because it's like there's no inherent sort of interest. They just wanted the answer to be something different. They wanted it to be a conspiracy. They wanted law enforcement to be, the real killers. They wanted a cult. They wanted it to be Ron Logan. So it's not even about Richard Allen. They don't care about
Right.
Richard Allen. Richard Allen's like the invisible man over here. This is about basically, this isn't what I ordered. Send it back to the kitchen.
Yeah, it's like imagine if you read a mystery novel and on the last page it turns out that the guilty person is someone no one's ever heard of. That's not
Mhm.
a very satisfying mystery novel. And that's what happened in this case, but this is real life. It's not a novel.
And I agree with you about Luigi Mangione. I mean, I really am strongly against vigilanteism
Right.
or anything like that. And if one group, even if you hate health insurance, which I certainly do, and the system in this country, and like I've made comments about United Healthcare in the past because of my dealing.
Mhm.
But at the same time, if we support that with a point that we agree with, then how can we complain when someone on a different side does something to it
Where
gets
does it
chaos.
end?
Yeah, where does it end? And that's not right. And also, there's a difference between saying I can see where like I can see you can understand things versus like justifying it or like making up stuff about like, oh no, everyone's innocent. Like
Mhm.
okay, but I see that movement more, and I can see where people are using it politically to say, okay, there's something really wrong with our healthcare system, but there's nothing like that here at all.
No, and I wonder too, because we as women, a lot of times, want to fix things. And so, do some of these women see Richard Allen as this project that they could swoop in? I can love him and I can fix him. So, I wonder if any of it has sort of that flavor to it at all. Did you
I
guys
think
get that sense from anyone that you came in contact with?
I think there was definitely more of that around Brian Koberger, because he's
Hmm.
younger. Yeah, I think there was more people finding him, attractive or kind of like that kind of he's my internet boyfriend. I love him sort of thing. And I think with Richard Allen less so because he just is not a very appealing person in general. But like I think there's a little bit of that. I think there's certain people where you're like, okay, is the hybristophilia kicking in here? Like, are we just attracted to the violent man so that you
Right.
can control him? And it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up getting some interest from people, in trying to be correspondents and again trying to maybe insert themselves into, if things don't work out between him and Kathy in the long run, they can be the next Mrs. Allen. I would not be surprised, but there's just always that element to this.
Hmm.
What's interesting though is that we used to have those people who were like, oh, I love Ted Bundy, isn't he dreamy? And they were kind of open about that. But
Hmm.
nowadays, I think a lot of them couch their their actual personal emotional feelings in
Right.
the language of social justice and in the language of like, no, I'm fighting for an innocent man's freedom. Well, I mean, the evidence convicted him and proved that he was guilty. Oh, no, no, he's innocent, but like I think it's like almost actually hiding what is really just an emotional reaction.
We did see, bizarrely enough, a number of people started to not only celebrate but also sexualize the defense attorneys.
Oh my God.
They called them defense daddies and posted pictures of them looking, I guess, handsome.
I'm so sorry, Claudia. I feel like we should like be sending you bleach for your ears right now. But yes, they're like the
Oh.
defense daddies. This group, I mean, some of these people would sexualize everything. They would like say insulting sexual things about people they didn't like, and they would like act like people like it was just weird. It was like, why can't we just keep that out of this? Like, can we just be normal for 5 seconds?
Just for five. Like, that's all we're
Yeah.
asking for right
Please.
now. Come on.
It would have been funny if it wasn't such a dark situation.
Oh my gosh. I know that you said it did kind of make it better that the cameras weren't there to keep sort of the public interest down a little bit. But we have heard several of the conspiracy theorists say that cameras were kept out because Richard Allen isn't guilty. And Judge Gold didn't want everybody to know that, wanted to keep everything in a tight, circle so that that wouldn't get out. What do you say to those people?
I'd say like you don't know how anything works, and there's transcripts of everything that
Mhm.
happens. So people are going to learn one way or another what was going on, and so I mean that's all public record at this point. I think these people think that like trials are like American Idol, where you can like text in and like
Right.
rank your favorites, and it's like that's you wouldn't have had any impact on the outcome. You would have just been entertained at home, and I think
Mhm.
there was for me. cameras in the courtroom might have been extreme in this case, but maybe like a delayed camera or like,
Right.
right? Like, so like if someone jumped up and did something, like they could
Or an audio feed.
or an audio feed,
Yeah.
or just letting the reporters have their own room where they could go in and kind of stage and leave and come back. I think that would have been a positive. There were middle grounds that I think she should and could have done.
And I think they have a point. I think public access was a
Mhm.
disaster in this trial. I don't think that there was a limit to public access out of a desire to have a conspiracy or anything like that. I think
Mhm.
Judge Gold just wanted to err on the side of having a safe and controlled environment for this trial. I think she should have allowed more public access. I think it would have potentially quelled some of this,
Mhm.
but yeah.
I think I used to think it would have totally quelled it. Now I still think it probably would have some of it, but at the same time, I mean, people would have just clipped stuff into TikToks and made it whatever they wanted it to be. So it's like, I don't know,
Right.
maybe we're deluding ourselves.
Let's talk about the book. So, what made you decide this is the one that we're going to do? This is the story that we have to tell.
It's just such an enormous case, and it's such a case that is difficult to get your arms around.
Mhm.
And we would always get so many questions about it from members of the public, and it's like I can't tell these people to go listen to hundreds of hours of my podcast. Like, God help them, I mean, like,
I mean, you can.
Yeah.
it would be like they'd be like, "Oh, what did you do to me?" But for us, our first love, as you can see from our background, is books and
Mhm.
crime books. These are all crime books, specifically. Like it's one of those things where I think a book can do a lot more than a
Mhm.
docuseries or a podcast. And podcasts and docuseries have their strengths that books
Mhm.
can't do. But with a book, it takes you through the whole story and immerses you in kind of oftentimes a chronological order of here's everything that happened. And we felt that that was lacking in the case and that we could be people who could put our own experiences into writing that.
Is it ever frustrating when you look at some of the other people that covered the case, podcasters or YouTubers, people like that seem to have a very skewed vision of what was going on and seem to really just be there to put out a specific message for the defense, perhaps?
Yeah. Oh, it was
Talk
aggravating.
about dealing with those kind of people.
And it was aggravating, especially during trial, because it was like no one else can see. So we
Mhm.
felt times like the voice crying out in the wilderness, everyone saying, wow, the defense daddies are killing it today. Look how cool and fashionable they are. Baldwin did a backflip off the table and then went off on a skateboard. And it's like I'm being facetious. It would be like they fell on their face and then started crying. It was like like and it was like I think people were understandably like, wait, Murder Sheet's saying something really different. Like, are they
Mhm.
full of it? And we started being like, are we losing our mind? Are,
Right.
are we the biased ones? Like, I mean, is it possible that we've just read this wrong? And we kept on having those conversations with ourselves because if we're the outlier, we never wanted it to be like, well, we're just so
Right.
entrenched, and I mean, we have a viewpoint certainly, but it was like I mean, if people perceived us as pro prosecution, but I'll tell you, if Nicholas McClellan, the prosecutor, had fallen on his face, we would have reported that because
Mhm.
what happened and we want you guys to know. Um, so it was frustrating and it was sort of like, you know, like why are these people coming in and doing this? Like what's the benefit? And what we learned is that they're catering to an audience that demands conspiracy and demands flashy sensationalism. So, and I mean I almost feel bad for some of these people because once you
Mhm.
chain yourself to that kind of audience, you're going to be their dancing monkey for the rest of your career. Like you can't come and tell that mob, actually, guys, the daddies didn't do so well today because they'll start, they're going to
Right.
take their attention and leave and go to someone who will tell them what they want to hear. And we've always tried to cultivate an audience that's more, is first of all not going to just believe, we tell them, hey, we're going to make mistakes and you can
Mhm.
correct us. Like, like
Right.
we're not above you. We're like, it's egalitarian here. Like, we're not, you might have more expertise in what we're talking about than we are. And we appreciate people letting us know if we messed up. And also, listen to a bunch of sources and think critically. But I mean,
Mhm.
the nice thing about the kind of nutty audience is that they will be slavishly devoted to anybody who tells them what they want to hear. So, I think these people see them as a revenue source.
Kevin, I wanted to talk to you quickly about your expertise and some of the missteps that we did see the daddies, I can't believe I even just said that, that they made along the way, especially before the trial. And so, just from a legal perspective, were you surprised at all the missteps that we saw, and yet we still got to see these two finish out the case?
I hate to keep using the word, but I was genuinely shocked at the level of performance I saw and at how trivial some of these filings were. They once made a filing, for instance, basically saying Judge Gull should smile more because Judge Gull had said, had used the word ding dong to refer to Nick McClelland. She's never said ding dong to us. And they're complaining about that. And this is a murder trial. Two girls died. What are you doing? And then they came up with this whole Odinism theory. I say they came up with it. Actually, it was investigated by the police relatively early on, and frankly, it was disproven by the police relatively early on.
Mm-hmm.
But they adopted it, and then they never really added any evidence or did any work on it beyond what they got from the police. And there was a very important pretrial hearing where they were not going to be allowed to use Odinism in the trial unless they were able to offer evidence that there was actually a connection between Odinism and the murders.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would think going into that hearing, they would really have gathered their absolute best evidence and be prepared to knock everyone's socks off. And they just fell flat on their face. They had uh, an expert. I use that word loosely.
I'll air quote for you.
Yeah.
Expert.
He had cross-examination. It came out that she had announced her conclusions before she had even looked at any of the evidence. And she was
Wow.
unable to cite any other instance where a group of white supremacists killed two white girls. So just seeing all of this stuff pile one on top of each other, I was just shocked because this is quite likely the biggest case of their careers.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think they would really, really work hard and try to put on the absolute best defense they could and make a good impression. And that did not happen.
And they never got called ding dongs either. So they
Oh,
failed
God.
on both fronts, I'm guessing.
Anya has never called me a ding dong, which is really a source of strife in our marriage.
Jesus wept.
Well, as it should be. So I do a lot of times give out homework on this podcast because we talk about some heavy things. So Anya, the homework for you will be within the next 24 hours to call Kevin a ding dong in the most loving way, of course.
You heard her.
I gotta do it. I gotta do
Yeah.
what Claudia says. So
Now it has to be done.
Yes.
All right. Want to get back to the book. How was it writing it? Because like you'd lived through the trial, super emotional to hear and see all the things that you guys heard and saw. You do it all the time. You watch these cases, you see all this evidence. It's got to be troubling. But here you took it a step further, and let's dig even deeper and talk about it for even longer. How was that for you guys?
it was pretty rough. And and again, I want to just be clear. We brought this on ourselves. We opted to do this. Other people did not have a choice to be involved in this, like the victim's family. So like, don't feel bad for us. But it was rough, and a lot of it got condensed into kind of early on. We had a kind of a tight deadline, and we wanted to make it as good as possible. So we were working like 17-hour days. Like it was intense. And I remember there were like times where I was just writing it, and I mean there was, oh God, I remember I got sick in the middle of this. So I'm in bed editing and like typing and writing, and I always listen to music when I write, and a life in a northern town came on, and it just reminded me of Delphi for some reason. I just started crying, and like I just felt like I was constantly crying and writing. It was like, it wasn't even like, it was thinking about some stuff we went through, but just thinking about what all these people went through, and thinking about what these girls went through before they died. And just like, it was just horrible. I mean, it was just so sad, but I don't
It
know.
was overwhelming because there was a
Mhm.
gag order in place,
Right.
which the prosecution and law enforcement took very seriously. So we were not able to talk with them until after the sentencing. And then after the sentencing, we had this tight deadline, so we wanted to do the interviews as quickly as we could. So then it was like one after another, we would hear these very intense stories about these very strong experiences these people
Mhm.
went through and how it affected them. And in most of those interviews, tears were shed. And so that was also overwhelming to be the recipient of all of that.
Remember one investigator, I started tearing up based on what he was saying. He's like, "Don't cry. I'm crying." Like it was just like it was just a lot. But it was the only thing I will say is getting to talk to some of those people who did go through this case was somewhat cathartic because it was like we don't know what they went through because they were in it so much more than we
Right.
were. We have a little we have an inkling of what it was. And it made us feel like, okay, like other people have dealt with this too.
And so the focus of the book is on the people who live the case.
Mhm.
Sometimes when people write a book, they have a lot of their own experiences and stuff in it. And we made the decision that the real heroes and heroines of this story were the people of Delphi. And so that's what our focus was.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you want people to come away with when they read this book, other than, here's the truth, we reported it fantastically, we're on point, but what is that one thing that you really want people to get when they read it?
Yeah, no, great question. For me, Abby and Libby are heroes,
Mhm.
and they were crucial in solving their own case, and their legacy deserves to be celebrated and remembered first and foremost when we think about this horrible tragedy. That's the forefront. And then perhaps if people can walk away and say, okay, maybe if I hear about like a really wild theory or a really wild situation in true crime, I can just reserve some judgment. Sometimes the
Mhm.
crazy stuff is true, and sometimes that's going to be the right answer. But oftentimes, if one side's putting it out and we don't need to necessarily jump to the conclusion of like, oh, well, that sounds more interesting, so I'm going to go with that. So if people can kind of apply that to their own, and listen, I'm the biggest person where I'm a journalist, so I'm going to be, oh, wow, this is the wild angle, so I'm going to look at
Mhm.
this. But I've had to, as we've done this work, I've had to kind of suppress that side of me. And I think that's for the better, and it allows me to critically analyze things better. So I would hope people might say they're going to do that too. But I also just really want them to think about Abby and Libby.
Very well said. In addition to what my lovely wife said, I would say, as a lawyer, my focus is on the legal process. And
Mhm.
it's been frustrating to me to some degree over the last year or so. People don't understand the verdict. We go out to McDonald's or what have you, people come up to us and say, "Do you really think they got the right guy? What about this or that?" And it's not their fault. It's just a lot of the reporting on this didn't really go into these details. So
Mhm.
if you read this book, even if you believe Richard Allen is innocent of this crime, I hope you come away with an understanding of the evidence and an understanding of why the jury chose to convict him.
We have a few minutes left, so I want to ask a couple last quick questions. The first is about vicarious trauma. So it's something that I talk about a lot as a host of the type of things that I talk about. I get laid on people's stories, and their traumas and their difficulties. But so do you guys. You guys live that every single day as well with the research that you do and the cases that you talk about. So, not just this case, but overall, how do you guys deal with that? And how do you make sure that it doesn't negatively affect you to the point that it could?
Really good question. I think we've actually been not great about not letting it affect us in the past. It's something we're trying to improve with. And I think that's,
Yeah.
something we're trying to get better with over time because
It's a struggle because, frankly, your first reaction is, why should I be upset or having these problems? Because these people have suffered so much more than me. How dare I say that I have
Mhm.
any
yeah, you
issues?
don't want to like deal with it and I think we've tried to do things and sometimes it's impossible. We've tried to do things like leave our work behind and go do things that are just fun or just a couple of
Mhm.
times or something. That's been helpful. Sometimes that's not possible, but I think we're trying to kind of construct our lives in a way where we kind of silo this stuff off a little bit more. And maybe sometimes compartmentalization is not good, and then other times maybe in this situation it could be a
Mhm.
good thing to say, okay, let's just leave that as much as possible at work, and also just acknowledging that, like, oh, I'm having a fear reaction right now because this is reminding me of something, or like I see the crime scene pictures sometimes, I can't get it out of my head sometimes, and it's like, how do you deal with that? And just kind of acknowledging that is happening, I think, is probably a big, because again, you just feel like, oh my God, like I said, we have a podcast. Like, how did we traumatize ourselves with this? It was like everything we decided to do was our choice. Other people have been dealing with this and it's their family members or it's their entire career or whatever.
Mhm.
So, I mean, sometimes I'm like, we don't have the right to be traumatized, but I think that's probably not a super helpful way of dealing with it. So we
One
kind
You
thing
of
I
do
think
have the right. You do have the
you have
right
the
to be
right to be
traumatized.
traumatized.
I think for a number of reasons, I think we're lucky that we work together and
Yeah.
we're married.
Mhm.
And in this context is if I'm having like a rough time dealing with some of this, I don't have to explain it to Anya because she's there too, and she
Mhm.
understands why it might be bothering me and vice versa. So we're very lucky we're both doing the same type of work at the same time, and that gives us an understanding of the other.
That's been helpful. And then I think the thing that we've had to do is just try to unhook ourselves from work, 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 work.
Mhm.
Especially the traumatic side of it, and especially the really dark side of it, because when you go home to your spouse and they don't do what you do, they might be like, oh, let's go like do something fun. Whereas like we might be more of like, we go do something fun and it's like, so what do you think about the Delphi thing? And like we're back in it. So it's like we've had to try to set boundaries as possible,
Right.
dragging the other person back into it.
So, we all have different self care techniques. One of the things that I sometimes do, and a lot of other people sometimes do, is they run off and get tattoos as a form of self care. Now, I know that you guys do not have any tattoos, and that's okay. But if you were going to get one, so we're going to eliminate all the traditional barriers. So it's not going to hurt. You can snap your fingers and it'll go away when you want it to, and it's going to be free. What tattoo are you getting and where are you putting it? And neither of you can say ding dong. Go.
Okay, so
Ladies first.
I'll go. And it sounds so corny. I'm sorry to everyone. I'm sorry to Claudia. I'm sorry to your audience. I think I would get Kevin's name. Just
You
Kevin.
just,
Aw.
yeah.
Oh,
I was going to say on my arm, Anya's name,
yeah.
like the date I met her.
I was gonna say, yeah, you're on my arm too, but like up here where I can wear it
Uh-huh.
and
Like,
not
yeah.
yeah, kind of
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
yeah. So not always have it there, but just in a nice script, and yeah, maybe the day we met or the day we first talked or something. I
The
think
day we got married.
the day we got married, something like that. Just something so we can have matching tattoos.
We're always stealing each other's answers.
Yeah, I know.
I
We really,
love it. I feel like that's a sign,
yeah.
that
Oh,
maybe this should happen.
I'm gonna tell you, you'll love this. We went to Target to get our dad's Father's Day cards, and like I went and did something, he went and did something, and we came back and we had the same exact card for our
No.
It was meant to
Okay. Okay. You guys were meant to be, and you're one of the few because you're not supposed to get, a significant other's name on you. It's supposed to be bad luck. I will say my husband does have my name on him and I have his initials, and this year is our 20th anniversary. So rules are meant to be broken.
Yes.
Áine and Kevin, where can people find you? So if they want to grab The Shadow of the Bridge, if they want to come hang out with you guys and read some of the books sitting behind you, or if they want to check out the murder sheet, where can they find you?
So we're pretty much on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, you should be able to look up Murder Sheet and see us. And as for the book, I always like to support the local independent bookstores. So calling your local bookstore and saying, hey, like, do you guys have any copies? Can I order something through you? Or, bookshop.org is great. Amazon's an option for sure. And, I think the one thing I will say for the international folks, it's we're working on some of the international rights stuff that's more complicated than we thought it was going to be. But, it should be coming at some point where it'll be more accessible for everybody. And Kevin did the audiobook. So if anyone wants to listen to that,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
He did such a good job. I was so proud of him.
So nervous.
He was so nervous. He's like, I don't want anyone to hear this. I was like, you did good.
And it's so weird, too, because you talk all the time for a living. So it's funny that suddenly this had you nervous.
Usually I'm just talking to her.
Yeah, he's like, I'm talking to you, but now I'm talking to this audio engineer and then everyone. I'm like, Kevin, the podcast goes to all those people, too.
Right. We're all hearing that, too, Kevin. Come on.
I may not be the smartest guy.
He doesn't know how anything works.
Áine and Kevin, you guys have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out for a few minutes with me and with the audience and talking about not only the Delphi case, but also some of the ways that you guys keep yourselves healthy and keep your relationship strong. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You've been a delight, Claudia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I so appreciate you more than you know. I'm so glad to have you on here. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.